I watched the footage on my phone, shivering in the dark at 3 a.m. The timestamp on the screen read 02:35. In the grainy black and white video, my front door opened without a sound. A man stepped inside. He didn't check the TV, and he didn't look for jewelry. He walked straight to the mantelpiece, pulled a machinist's ruler out of his pocket, and moved my dead husband's photograph exactly 3 millimeters to the right. Then he walked over to the couch where I was pretending to sleep, leaned down to my ear, and whispered, "Just a little longer, Mom." It wasn't a burglar. It was my son, Peter. And he wasn't trying to rob me. He was systematically trying to drive me insane. Francis's watch wasn't in the drawer. I stood in my bedroom at 6:30 in the morning, staring at the empty velvet box where his watch had lived for 15 years. The silver Timex with the scratched face and the leather band worn soft from decades on his wrist. The morning light was just beginning to bleed through the sheer curtains, casting long gray shadows across the room, but I didn't need light to know the box was empty. I knew it by the hollow feeling in my chest, a cold weight that settled behind my ribs. It had nothing to do with grief. It had everything to do with the absolute, terrifying certainty that I had put it there last night before bed. I had placed it in the center of the velvet cushion. I had closed the drawer until it clicked. I had done it just like I did every single night since the day the paramedics carried him out of this house. And now, it was gone. I didn't move at first. I just stood there, gripping the edge of the mahogany dresser until my knuckles turned white, trying to force my brain to find a logical explanation. Maybe I knocked it over. Maybe it fell behind the dresser. Maybe I put it in the bathroom. But I knew I hadn't. This was the third time this week something had moved. On Monday, it was the coffee maker. I had walked into the kitchen at 5 in the morning, my internal clock still set to baker's time, and found the machine shifted 6 inches to the left. The black rubber cord, which I always coiled counterclockwise and tucked behind the unit, was lying loose on the granite counter like a dead snake. I had stared at it for 10 minutes, my coffee cup trembling in my hand, trying to remember if I had moved it to clean. But the dust outline on the counter told the truth. The machine had been dragged. On Tuesday, it was Francis's photo on the mantle, the one from our 10th anniversary, where he was laughing and holding a baguette like a sword. I had walked into the living room and found it turned slightly, facing the wall instead of the room. Just 20 degrees. Just enough to look wrong. Just enough to make me feel like the house itself was rejecting me. When I'd found it like that, I'd stood there in the silence, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and trying to remember if I'd bumped it, if I'd been dusting and forgotten, or if I was losing my mind the way my son Peter kept gently suggesting I was. And now the watch. Francis's watch. The one thing I never moved. The one thing I never touched, except to hold it to my ear some nights when the house felt too quiet and too empty, listening to the phantom ticking of a mechanism that had stopped years ago, needing something solid to remind me he'd been real. Panic is a strange thing. It doesn't always make you scream. Sometimes it makes you very, very quiet. I backed away from the dresser. I walked into the hallway, my bare feet silent on the hardwood. I checked the bathroom counter. Nothing. I checked the nightstand. Nothing. I checked the jewelry box, my fingers fumbling with the tiny brass latch, tearing through my necklaces and earrings. Nothing. My hands were shaking by the time I made it to the kitchen. The sun was fully up now, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air and making everything look normal. But it wasn't normal. That's when I saw the bread knife, the serrated Wusthof knife, the one I had bought in 1998 when the bakery finally turned a profit. I always kept it in the wooden block, third slot from the right. It was a habit born of 30 years in a commercial kitchen. A place for everything, and everything in its place. If you reach for a knife blindly during a rush and it isn't there, you get cut. It was in the first slot now, and the heavy wooden cutting board I'd washed and left drying on the counter last night, it was now inside the cabinet. And the blue checkered dish towel that had been hanging on the oven handle, it was now folded perfectly in the drawer next to the sink. Small things, tiny things, the kind of things that would make anyone else shrug and think, I must have been tired. The kind of things that make you doubt your own memory and your own reality. But I was 63 years old. I was Martha Bennett. I had run Bennett's Bakery since I was 33. And running a bakery meant precision. It meant knowing that 5 grams of yeast makes a loaf rise, but 7 grams makes it collapse. It meant muscle memory so deep you could knead dough in your sleep. I knew where things belonged, and I knew where I'd put them. Someone had been in my house. Someone had walked through my locked doors, stood in my kitchen while I slept upstairs, and moved my life around like pieces on a game board. I didn't scream. I didn't call the police. I went to the junk drawer next to the fridge, the one that always stuck a little in the humidity, and I pulled it open. I dug past the takeout menus and the loose batteries until my fingers closed around a roll of clear Scotch tape and a sharp black permanent marker. I didn't just look for evidence. I hunted for it with a desperation that tasted like copper in my mouth. I started in the kitchen. I crawled on my hands and knees across the cold linoleum, feeling the chill seep into my bones. I took a tiny, nearly invisible sliver of clear tape and placed it exactly where the rubber foot of the coffee maker touched the counter. I marked the edge with the black pen, a microscopic dot that no one would notice unless they were looking for it. I moved to the living room. I knelt before the fireplace, my knees popping, and drew a faint line on the wood of the mantel, aligning it perfectly with the corner of Francis's photo frame. Next, I went to the bookshelf and angled the books so they formed a straight line, then placed a single strand of gray hair from my own head across the spines of the encyclopedias. If someone pulled a book out, the hair would fall. Then I went upstairs to my bedroom. I photographed the position of the alarm clock, the angle of the lampshade, the way my slippers sat by the bed, perfectly parallel. I took 37 photos total. I documented my own home like it was a crime scene, because that's what it was becoming, even if I didn't understand the crime yet. I was sweating, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps, terrified that if I blinked, the room would shift again. Then I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, and stared at the screen. It was 7:15 a.m. I called my son. Peter answered on the second ring. His voice was warm, smooth, and concerned, that specific tone he had adopted over the last few months. It was the voice you use for a child or a pet or an invalid. "Mom, hey," he said. I could hear the background noise of the bakery, the hum of the commercial ovens, and the clatter of trays. "Everything okay? You don't usually call this early." I gripped the phone tight. "Peter, were you here yesterday?" There was a pause. It wasn't a silence, it was a hesitation, a microsecond of calculation, just enough time for a brain to decide which lie to tell. "No," he said slowly. "I was at the Haddonfield location all day dealing with the new flour suppliers." "Why? Did something happen?" "I can't find your father's watch," I said, keeping my voice steady, trying not to let the tremor bleed through. "The silver Timex, it's not in the box, and some things in the kitchen, they're moved. The coffee maker, the knives." Another pause. This one was longer. It was the sound of performative patience. "Mom," he said, and I could practically see him rubbing his temples the way he did when a customer complained about the price of sourdough. "We talked about this last week. Remember? You thought you lost your purse, and it was in the car. You've been under a lot of stress lately, with the anniversary coming up." "I didn't lose my purse," I snapped, the anger flaring up. "You found it in the refrigerator." "I never put my purse in the refrigerator, Peter." "I know you think you didn't," he said gently. too gently. But I found it next to the milk. Look, do you want me to come over after my shift? We can look for the watch together. It probably just fell behind the dresser. You know how things get misplaced. I have the spare key, I said. The one I gave you for emergencies. Do you still have it? Of course I have it, he said. It's on my key ring. Mom, are you feeling okay? Have you been taking your blood pressure medication? Sometimes confusion can be a side effect if you miss a dose. The gaslighting was subtle. It was elegant. It wasn't "you're crazy." It was "are you feeling okay?" It was "we talked about this." It was wrapping an insult in a layer of love so thick you almost choked on it. I'm fine, I lied. I probably just moved it to clean and forgot. You're right, I'm just tired. Okay, he said, and I could hear the relief in his voice, the relief that I was accepting the narrative. Get some rest. I'll stop by later to check on you. Love you. Love you too, I said. The words felt like ash in my mouth. I hung up and walked to the window. Outside, the New Jersey autumn was turning ugly. It was that specific gray dampness that rolls off the Delaware River and settles into the bones of Cherry Hill like a sickness. The sky was a flat, bruised slate, threatening rain that never seemed to fall. The maple trees in the front yard, the ones Francis had planted 30 years ago, saplings that were now giants, were stripped bare, their skeletal branches scratching against the vinyl siding in the wind. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It was the kind of weather that made the suburbs feel less like a neighborhood and more like a graveyard with better landscaping. The houses on Maple Avenue stood silent and separate, pulled back from the street. Every door was closed. Every blind was drawn. It was a place where you could scream in your kitchen and no one would hear you over the sound of their own televisions. I stared at the empty street. Peter had paused. He had hesitated before saying no, and then he had immediately pivoted to my medication. He was building a case. I didn't know what for, and I didn't know why, but I knew my son. I knew the way he organized the bakery spreadsheets, shifting columns to hide losses and smoothing over the rough edges. He was editing me. He was rewriting my reality so that when I finally broke, no one would be surprised. But he had made one mistake. He thought he was dealing with his mother. He forgot he was dealing with Martha Bennett. That night, I didn't sleep. I prepared for bed at 10 o'clock, going through the motions in case he was watching from the street. I turned off the living room lights, brushed my teeth, put on my nightgown, went into my bedroom and turned off the lamp. But I didn't get into bed. I waited 10 minutes in the dark, listening to the house settle. Then, moving slowly, I crept back downstairs. I didn't turn on any lights. I navigated by the faint blue glow of the street lamps filtering through the blinds. I went to the living room bookshelf. I took my phone and wedged it between two hard covers, The Joy of Cooking and A History of World War II. I angled the camera so it pointed directly at the hallway and the front door. I plugged it into the charger so the battery wouldn't die. I set it to record. Then I laid down on the couch, pulling a heavy wool afghan over me, burying myself in the shadows. I left the small lamp above the stove in the kitchen on, the safety light Francis had insisted on because he said a house should never be completely dark. It cast a long, yellow triangle of light across the hallway floor. I waited. 11 o'clock passed. Then midnight. The silence of the house was heavy, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards as the temperature dropped. Every sound made my muscles tense. A car driving past sounded like an explosion. The wind rattling the storm door sounded like a fist. I lay there, staring through my eyelashes, my breathing shallow. I wondered if I was crazy. I wondered if I would wake up in the morning with hours of empty footage and have to admit that Peter was right, that I was a lonely old woman inventing ghosts to fill the silence. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. My eyelids grew heavy. The warmth of the blanket was seducing me into sleep. I started to drift, my thoughts blurring. Click. My eyes snapped open. It was soft. So soft. The sound of metal sliding against metal, tumblers falling into place. I stopped breathing. I didn't move a muscle. I didn't blink. The deadbolt turned. Slowly. Painfully slowly. Someone was turning the key with exquisite care to avoid the heavy thud the lock usually made. The door handle dipped. The door eased open, just a few inches. A slice of cold, damp night air rushed into the house, smelling of wet leaves and ozone. I watched through the slit of my half-closed eyes, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Please be a burglar, I thought. Please be a stranger. Just take the TV and leave. A figure slipped through the gap. He was tall. He wore dark clothes, a black hoodie and jeans. He closed the door behind him, engaging the lock with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. He turned toward the kitchen light. It was Peter, my own son, my firstborn, the boy I had nursed through chickenpox, the man I had entrusted with the combination to the safe. He was standing in the center of the hallway he had grown up in, but he didn't look like the boy I raised. In the dim, yellow light of the kitchen lamp, his face was slack and expressionless. His eyes looked hollow, black voids that absorbed the light. He wasn't just walking, he was prowling. He moved with a disturbing, fluid grace, placing his feet carefully to avoid the creaky boards I knew he had memorized as a teenager sneaking out at night. He pulled a small flashlight from his pocket and clicked it on. He kept the beam pointed at the floor, creating a pool of white light that moved with him. I watched, sick to my stomach, as he approached the mantel. He didn't look at the rest of the room. He walked straight to the photo of Francis, the one I had marked with the microscopic tape. He leaned in close, his face inches from the glass. He stared at his dead father's image. He didn't look sad. He didn't look nostalgic. He looked at Francis with an expression of pure, unadulterated loathing. A sneer curled his lip. Then he reached out. With the delicate touch of a surgeon, he gripped the frame. He didn't knock it over. He didn't smash it. He shifted it, 3 millimeters to the right. He pulled a small ruler from his pocket, a machinist's ruler, and measured the distance from the edge of the mantel. He adjusted it again, 2 millimeters back. It was precise, obsessive, and terrifying. He stepped back, checked his work, and nodded. Then he turned toward the kitchen. I heard the soft clink of cabinet doors opening. I heard the slide of a drawer. He was moving the silverware. He was rearranging the spices. He was planting the seeds of my insanity. I squeezed my eyes shut as I heard his footsteps return to the living room. He was coming toward the couch. Don't move. Don't breathe. Don't scream. The footsteps stopped. I could feel his presence looming over me. I could smell him. The faint scent of expensive sandalwood cologne mixed with the damp smell of the rain. He was standing right over me. I kept my chest rising and falling in the rhythm of deep sleep, forcing my body to stay limp, even as every nerve ending screamed at me to run. I could feel the weight of his gaze on my face. It was physical, like a touch. He was studying me, watching my eyelids for a flutter, watching my throat for a swallow. He stood there for what felt like an eternity. 10 seconds, 20, 30. Then he leaned down. I felt his breath against my ear, warm and moist. He whispered. It was so quiet I almost didn't hear it. So quiet he must have thought I was too deeply asleep to hear anything at all. Just a little longer, Mom, he breathed. Just hold on a little longer. The menace in his voice wasn't in the volume. It was in the patience. It was the voice of a man waiting for an animal to bleed out. He straightened up. The flashlight beam swung away. I heard him walk to the door. The lock clicked and the door opened and closed. He was gone. I lay there in the dark for 5 minutes, trembling so violently the entire couch shook. My teeth chattered. I gasped for air, tearing the blanket off my face and sucking in oxygen as if I had been drowning. I sat up, grabbed the phone from the bookshelf, and stopped the recording. I pressed play. There on the tiny screen, in grainy green-tinted night vision, was the proof. My son letting himself into my home, moving my husband's photo, and standing over me like the angel of death. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't forgetful. I wasn't senile. I was a target. And the man hunting me was the one person in the world I was supposed to be able to trust. I looked at the front door. The deadbolt was locked. To anyone else, the house looked secure. But I knew the truth now. The lock didn't matter because the monster had the key. I stood up, my legs shaking, and walked to the kitchen. I looked at the coffee maker. He had unplugged it. Just slightly. Just enough so that in the morning I would think it was broken, or that I had forgotten to plug it in. I plugged it back in. Precision went both ways. He had spent months turning my life into a math problem, calculating the exact angle of my decline. But he had forgotten the one variable that ruins every equation, the rage of a mother who realizes her son is a monster. I wasn't going to call the police. Not yet. The police would see a son checking on his mother. They would see a helpful visit. They wouldn't see the ruler, and they wouldn't understand the 3 millimeters. No, I needed more. I needed to know why. I walked to the window and watched the taillights of his car disappear down Maple Avenue. Okay, Peter, I whispered to the empty room. You want to play games? Let's play. I was about to become very, very precise about destroying my son before he could finish destroying me. For the next 48 hours, I didn't just lie. I became the actress of a lifetime. I realized that if Peter was building a case for my incompetence, the only way to blind him was to give him exactly what he wanted. I had to feed the monster until it was fat and lazy. I started on Wednesday morning. I drove to the ShopRite on Route 70, the big one with the confusing parking lot. I parked my ash Toyota Camry in Section D, right near the cart return. Then I walked to the entrance, stopped, and turned around. I stood there in the biting wind, forcing my shoulders to slump and forcing my face to go slack with panic. I pulled out my phone and dialed Peter. Mom? He answered on the first ring. He was monitoring me. I could feel it. Peter, I said, letting my voice wobble and crack. I hyperventilated slightly, making my breath hitch. I don't know where I am. I'm at the store, but I can't find the car. I've been looking for 20 minutes. Did I walk here? Did someone steal it? Calm down, he said, and I heard the satisfaction dripping from his voice like syrup. You drove. Check your location sharing. I can see you. You're in Section D. I can't see it, I whimpered. It all looks the same. Peter, I'm scared. Stay right there, he said. I'm 10 minutes away, don't move. I hung up and slipped my phone into my pocket. I stood there in the cold, watching the gray clouds churn above the asphalt, feeling the damp chill seep through my coat. Passersby looked at me, an old woman standing confused in a parking lot, and looked away, embarrassed. I felt a flush of genuine humiliation. This was what he was doing to me. He was turning me into a tragedy. When Peter's black Cadillac pulled up 10 minutes later, I put on the performance of my life. I rushed to him, grabbing his arm, shaking. I thought I lost it, I cried. I thought I lost everything. He patted my hand, his touch patronizing and cold. It's okay, Mom. It's right there. See? You parked in D. You usually park in A. You just got turned around. It happens. He didn't look worried. He looked validated, like a scientist who had just confirmed a hypothesis. Maybe, he said softly, guiding me toward my car like I was a toddler. Maybe you shouldn't be driving alone right now, just until you're feeling better. Maybe you're right, I whispered, keeping my eyes on the ground so he wouldn't see the hate burning in them. Maybe I'm not safe. I did it again that afternoon. I called him to ask how to pay the electric bill, a bill I had been paying online since the internet was invented. I asked him if he had seen my reading glasses, fully knowing they were on top of my head. I played the fool. I played the victim. And every time I stumbled, he was there to catch me, collecting my failures like trophies. But while I played the confused widow during the day, I was sharp as a razor at night. I documented everything. I bought a second hard drive and hid it in the hollow space behind the baseboard in the guest room closet. I backed up the video of Peter's 2:35 a.m. visit to 3 different cloud accounts with passwords he would never guess. I made copies of the bank statements showing the fraudulent withdrawals and taped them to the back of the oil painting in the hallway. And I started following him. On the 3rd day, Friday, I knew Peter would be at the main bakery location in Haddonfield for the weekly inventory audit. He usually stayed there until noon. At 9 a.m., I got in my car. I didn't drive to the bakery. I drove to his apartment building. Peter lived in one of those new, sterile complexes near the Cherry Hill Mall, luxury living that looked like a prison made of glass and gray stucco. It was called The View, a name that promised everything and meant nothing. The building loomed over the parking lot, cold and imposing. The sky above was a heavy, bruised purple, the kind of oppressive cloud cover you only get in South Jersey right before a storm breaks. The air smelled of ozone and wet asphalt. I parked 3 blocks away at a Rite Aid, pulling my coat tight against the damp chill and feeling exposed. I pulled my wool hat down low and walked toward the complex. In a state with 9 million people, I had never felt so completely and terrifyingly alone as I did walking toward that silent electronic gate. I had the key. Last week, Peter had come over for dinner. He had thrown his keys on the kitchen counter while he helped me find my phone that he had hidden in the pantry. While he was rummaging in the kitchen, I had pressed his apartment key into a block of modeling clay I kept in my craft drawer. The next day, I had driven to a locksmith in Camden, a place with bars on the windows and no questions asked, and had a copy made. I approached the side entrance. My heart was thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. If he catches me, it's over. He'll commit me today. I slid the key into the electronic lock. It resisted for a second, sticky and new, and panic flared in my chest. Then click. The light turned green. I slipped inside. The hallway smelled of industrial carpet cleaner and recycled air. It was silent. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor, keeping my head down in case of cameras. Unit 3B. I stood before his door. My hand shook as I raised the key. This wasn't just breaking and entering. This was crossing a line. Once I opened this door, I wasn't his mother anymore. I was his enemy. I turned the key, and the door swung open. Peter's apartment was terrifyingly neat. It didn't look like a home. It looked like a showroom. White leather furniture, glass tables, abstract art that looked like violent slashes of black paint on canvas. It smelled of his expensive cologne and stale takeout, Thai food maybe, masking a deeper, chemical smell of cleaning fluid. It was the lair of a man who controlled everything because he felt nothing. I didn't waste time. I went straight to the kitchen island. His laptop was there, plugged in and charging, a sleek silver MacBook. I opened it. The screen lit up, asking for a password. I paused. Peter was arrogant. He thought he was smarter than everyone, which meant he was lazy about security because he didn't think anyone was smart enough to crack him. He had been using the same password since he was a teenager. The name of his childhood dog, followed by his birth year. I typed it in, Rusty 1984. The screen unlocked. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I sat on the bar stool, my legs trembling, and started to dig. I went to the Finder. I searched for Mom. A folder appeared. Labeled, Subject, Mother, Medical/Decline. I double-clicked it. Inside were dozens of video files. My finger hovered over the trackpad, shaking. I clicked the first file, dated 6 weeks ago. The media player opened. The screen filled with a grainy, black and white image of my bedroom. It was shot from high up, from the smoke detector, and the angle distorted my room into something grotesque and unfamiliar. I watched myself sleeping. I watched the digital timestamp in the corner tick forward. 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. I watched myself roll over. I watched myself kick off the blankets. He hadn't just recorded my confusion. He had recorded my stillness. He had hours of footage of me just lying in bed, vulnerable and unconscious. It was voyeuristic, pathological, and wasn't just about evidence. It was about ownership. He watched me like a boy watching an ant farm, waiting to see what would happen if he shook the glass. I felt a wave of nausea rise in my throat, hot and bitter. I gagged, pressing my hand over my mouth. My son wasn't just gaslighting me, he was obsessed with monitoring my decay. I clicked another video. This one was titled Kitchen Confusion Event 3. I watched myself walk into the kitchen and reach for the coffee maker, which he had moved. I saw the confusion on my face, saw myself checking the plug, and saw myself standing there, hands in my hair, looking like a lost child. And then I heard it, from the speakers of the laptop, a laugh. It was Peter's voice, recorded from behind the camera. He must have been watching the live feed on his phone. He chuckled, a low, cruel sound. "Look at her," his voice whispered on the recording. "Dance, puppet, dance." Tears pricked my eyes, hot and angry. He enjoyed it. He wasn't doing this for the money, or at least not only for the money. He was also doing it because he liked the power. I closed the video folder. I couldn't watch anymore. I needed the motive. I needed the why. I found another folder labeled Legacy. Inside were documents about Bennett's Bakery, financial records, partnership agreements, loan documents, and photos, dozens of photos of me and Francis in the early days. We didn't start with investors or corporate strategies. We started with $3,000 stashed in a rusted coffee tin and hands that were permanently calloused. I waitressed double shifts at a diner on Route 70, while Francis broke his back doing drywall, saving every crumpled dollar bill until we had enough to buy a used oven that rattled like a dying engine. We bled for that bakery. Literally. I remembered the night Francis sliced his hand open on a jagged metal prep table and wrapped it in duct tape because we couldn't stop needing the morning rush. That was the legacy Peter was selling for parts. I found a PDF document dated 3 months ago titled Expansion Proposal, Bennett's Bakery Buyout. I opened it and started reading, and with every paragraph, I felt the 30 years of my life crumbling into dust. Peter had been in talks with a corporate restaurant group called Meridian Holdings for almost a year. They wanted to buy Bennett's Bakery, all 3 locations, and turn it into a franchise model. 20 locations within 3 years, 50 within 5, prepackaged dough shipped from a central facility, standardized recipes, no more hand kneading, no more giving day-old bread to the homeless shelter. Everything that made Bennett's Bakery ours would be stripped away and replaced with whatever made the most profit on a spreadsheet. The proposed purchase price was $4 million. And according to the document, according to the signatures at the bottom, I wasn't even mentioned. The sale was structured to happen through the majority ownership that Peter and my younger son, Andrew, controlled. The 70% I'd signed away 2 years ago when Peter had told me it was just paperwork, just restructuring for tax purposes. But there was a catch. The contract had a unanimous consent clause for the sale of the original assets. I still had to sign off on the sale of the Cherry Hill location. Unless I scrolled to the appendix. There it was, a contingency clause. If any co-owner is deemed mentally or physically incapable of managing business affairs by a licensed physician or court order, their ownership stake and voting rights transfer immediately to the appointed power of attorney. And there was a note in Peter's handwriting in the margin, competency hearing scheduled No. 15th, Dr. Harrison willing to testify, video evidence prepared, November 15th, the date from the notebook, the date that was now 12 days away. My son wasn't just gaslighting me for cruelty. He was gaslighting me to trigger a legal execution. He needed me crazy so he could sell my life's work for $4 million. I sat there staring at the screen, and my mind drifted back to Francis, to his death, 15 years ago. He had a sudden heart attack. The doctors had called it a widowmaker, sudden. violent and unstoppable. But Francis had been healthy. He had passed his physical 2 months prior. He had been stressed, yes. He had been fighting with Peter about my blood ran cold. They had been fighting about expansion. Peter had wanted to franchise back then, too. He was 24, fresh out of business school, and hungry for money. Francis had said no. He had said, "Over my dead body. Over my dead body." I remembered that night in the hospital. Peter had been there. Peter had brought him the coffee an hour before he collapsed at the bakery. Peter had been the one to clean up the mug before the paramedics arrived. Peter had been the one to find the will. A cold realization washed over me, chilling me deeper than the drafty apartment ever could. The gaslighting, the methodical planning, and the patience. If Peter was willing to destroy his mother's mind for $4 million, what would he have been willing to do to his father for the first million? I wasn't just looking at a thief. I was looking at a man who might have killed my husband to clear the path to the throne. I needed to get out and to take this evidence to the police. I pulled out my phone and started photographing the screen. Every email, every contract page, every frame of the videos. Click, click. I was shaking so hard the phone was blurring, but I kept going. I had 200 photos. I needed everything. I was scrolling through his emails, looking for the name of the doctor, Dr. Harrison, when I heard it. Clink. The sound came from the hallway. It was distinct, metallic, the sound of a key sliding into a lock. I froze. My eyes shot to the front door. It was 10 feet away. The tumblers clicked over. 1, 2. It was Peter. It had to be. It was 11:30 a.m. He wasn't supposed to be home until 5. Why was he home? Think, Martha. Think. I scrambled off the bar stool, slammed the laptop shut, and grabbed my purse. The doorknob began to turn. I looked around frantically. The kitchen was open concept. The island offered no cover. The pantry. It was a narrow door next to the fridge. I scrambled inside, pulling the door shut just as the front lock clicked open. I didn't click the latch. The sound would give me away. I held the knob from the inside, my fingers slick with sweat. It was pitch black inside. The air smelled of expensive truffle oil and stale crackers. I pressed my eye to the sliver of light beneath the doorframe. Peter stepped into the apartment. Click-clack, click-clack. He stopped right in front of the pantry door. I could see the tips of his polished Oxfords. If he opened this door to grab a snack, if he decided he wanted a glass of water, I was cornered. I held my breath until my lungs burned, listening to the fabric of his suit rustle as he reached for something on the counter. Huh, he muttered. He must have noticed the laptop was moved, or maybe he could smell my perfume. He didn't move. He just stood there. I could hear him breathing. Then his phone rang. He answered it immediately. Yeah? No, I'm at the apartment. I forgot the hard drive. I'm grabbing it now. He walked around the island. He was moving away from the pantry. Yeah, I have it, he said into the phone. I'm leaving now. Tell the buyers the valuation is solid. He picked up the laptop, turned, and walked back toward the door. I stayed in the pantry, tears streaming down my face in the darkness, listening to his footsteps retreat. He opened the door and stepped out. Then he stopped. Wait, he said to the person on the phone. Did I lock the deadbolt when I left this morning? I could have sworn I double-locked it. Silence. It was only single-locked, he whispered. He stepped back inside. Mom? He called out. His voice wasn't confused anymore. It was sharp and dangerous. He knew. And I was trapped in a pantry in the pitch black with the monster standing between me and the only exit. The footsteps stopped abruptly on the hardwood floor of the living room. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, pressing against my eardrums like deep water. I held my breath, pressing a hand over my mouth, terrified that the frantic thumping of my heart would vibrate through the wall. I could hear him breathing. That's how close he was. Then his voice drifted through the apartment. Not shouting, not angry, but terrifyingly conversational. Mom? he called out. "You can come out. I can see your Toyota from the window. You parked in the wrong spot again." He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound that scraped against my nerves. "You're getting so careless," he whispered. My blood turned to ice. He wasn't scared that I was there. He was amused. "I'm impressed, actually," he continued, and I could hear him walking now, slowly, methodically checking rooms. Click-clack. Click-clack. "I didn't think you had it in you anymore. The old you, the woman who built a bakery from nothing, she would have figured this out months ago. But I thought I'd broken that part of you already." His footsteps got closer. He was checking the bathroom. Next would be the guest room. I looked around the small pantry. There was no other exit, but the noise of him opening the bathroom door gave me a second of cover. I pushed the pantry door open and slipped out, moving silently in my socks. The hallway to the bedroom was right there. I scuttled backward, staying low, and slipped into the bedroom. I scanned the room. No closet that locked, no bathroom exit, just the window. It led to a fire escape. We were on the 3rd floor. I moved toward the window as quietly as possible, but the old wood floors of the luxury renovation hadn't been properly nailed down. Creak. The sound was like a gunshot. "There you are," Peter said from the hallway. His voice was right behind the door. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I threw the window sash up. It stuck for a second, painted shut, and I shoved it with every ounce of adrenaline-fueled strength I possessed. It flew open with a screech of tearing paint. I scrambled out onto the metal grate. The cold wind slapped me in the face, stinging my eyes. The fire escape was old iron, rusted and slick with the damp New Jersey mist. I grabbed the railing, the rust biting into my palms, and swung my legs over. "Mom, stop! What are you doing?" Peter's voice exploded from the window behind me. It had shifted instantly from the taunting monster to the terrified son. He was performing for the neighbors. "You're going to hurt yourself. Get back inside," he shouted, loud enough for the street to hear. I didn't look back. I scrambled down the metal stairs, my boots slipping on the wet grate. Clang, clang, clang. My heart was in my throat. I expected a hand to grab my ankle. I expected him to pull me back in, but he didn't grab me. As I reached the 2nd floor landing, I risked a glance upward. Peter was framed in the window. He wasn't reaching for me. He wasn't panicking. He was just leaning against the frame, at arms crossed, watching me run. His face was completely blank. He looked like a scientist watching a rat navigate a maze, curious to see if it would survive the fall. He raised a hand and gave a small, mocking wave. I turned and ran. I hit the ground level, my knees jarring on the concrete, and sprinted for my car. I fumbled with the keys, dropped them, snatched them up, and threw myself into the driver's seat. I locked the doors, started the engine, and peeled out of the lot, checking the rearview mirror. He was still there. Standing on the fire escape in his expensive suit, his phone pressed to his ear. He was making a call. Probably to the police. Probably to Dr. Harrison. My mother is having an episode. She just jumped out a window. I drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just pointed the car west and drove until my hands stopped shaking enough to steer properly. I needed help. I needed someone who would believe me. I called Barbara. Barbara had been my lawyer for 20 years. She had drafted the original partnership agreements for the bakery. She had handled Francis's will. She was the only person left in this city who knew Martha Bennett, the businesswoman, not Martha Bennett, the confused widow. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Martha?" she said. "Are you okay? You sound." "I need to see you," I gasped, fighting for air. "Right now, Peter, he's trying to commit me. He's stealing the bakery. I have proofs. I have photos." There was a long pause on the other end. "Martha," Barbara said carefully, "where are you?" "I'm driving. I'm on Route 70. Meet me in Collingswood," she said. Her voice was tight, urgent. "The coffee shop on Haddon Avenue, the one with the green awning. I'm already nearby. There's someone here you need to talk to." "Who?" "Just come. Please, drive carefully." I made it to Collingswood in 20 minutes. I parked around the back, terrified that Peter's black Cadillac would pull up behind me. I checked my phone. No notifications. No calls. That scared me more than if he had been blowing up my phone. His silence meant he was planning. I walked into the coffee shop. It was warm and smelling of roasted beans and cinnamon, a smell that usually comforted me, but today made me nauseous. Barbara was waiting at a table in the back corner. Sitting next to her was a woman I didn't recognize. She was younger, maybe 40, with dark hair pulled back in a severe ponytail and eyes that looked like they had seen too much of humanity's worst behavior. I sat down. My hands were trembling so bad I had to clasp them together on the table. "Martha, this is Detective Morales," Barbara said, reaching out to touch my arm. "She's with the Camden County Fraud Division, and she's been investigating fraud cases in South Jersey. I tried to pull your deed this morning," Barbara continued, her voice tight. "But the system was locked. It had a law enforcement hold on it. Detective Morales has been tracking a ring of identity thieves in Camden County for months. She didn't know who the real victim was until I called her an hour ago." I looked at the detective. "Fraud? Did you find the transfers?" Detective Morales didn't speak. She didn't offer platitudes. She reached into a manila folder and slid a glossy photograph across the scratched wooden table. "Mrs. Bennett," she said, her voice gravely and serious. "Do you recognize this woman?" I looked down, my breath hitched in my throat. The world tilted on its axis. It was a still frame from a bank security camera. The timestamp was from last Thursday at 2:15 p.m. The woman in the photo was me, or at least it was a creature wearing my skin. She had my silver hair, cut in the exact same bob. She wore the gray trench coat I had donated to Goodwill 3 months ago. She held her purse the way I held mine, tucked tight under the left arm. She was standing at a teller window, signing a withdrawal slip. But the eyes were wrong. Even in the grainy photo, I could see it. They were younger, sharper, and devoid of the warmth I had spent a lifetime cultivating. They were the eyes of a predator mimicking prey. It was like looking into a mirror in a nightmare. I don't understand," I whispered. "That's me, but I wasn't at the bank last Thursday. I was at the dentist. I have the receipt." "We know," Morales said. "We checked your alibi. You were getting a root canal." "Then who is that?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," Morales said. "But she's been doing this for 3 months. 6 different banks, always withdrawals between $40,000 and $60,000. Always using your ID, your social security number, your account information, and according to the bank records, always signing with your signature." I stared at the photo. The ash coat, my coat, the one I thought I had donated. Peter must have taken it. He must have given it to her. She's an actress, I realized, the horror washing over me cold and clammy. He hired someone to be me, to create a paper trail of incompetence. "There's more," Barbara said quietly. She slid another document across the table. It was on thick, heavy paper, legal paper. "This came across my desk this morning," Barbara said, "because I'm listed as the trustee on the property deed. It was a foreclosure notice. Property at 4112 Maple Avenue, Cherry Hill, NJ." "Martha," Barbara said, her voice trembling slightly, "there's a second mortgage on your property, taken out in March, $180,000. The payments haven't been made since May. The bank is moving to seize the house." I stared at the black letters. They swam before my eyes. Francis's house. The home where we had marked the boy's heights on the kitchen door frame. The home where Francis had carried me over the threshold. The home where I was supposed to grow old and die in my own bed. Peter hadn't just stolen the money. He hadn't just stolen the business. He had stolen the roof over my head. He had leveraged my memories for cash and then stopped paying the bill. He can't," I stammered. "The house is paid off. We paid it off in 2005. "The loan was taken out in your name," Morales said gently. "Signed by you, Notarized. The woman in the photo, she's very good. I tried to speak. I tried to say that it wasn't fair. I tried to say that I had pictures of the laptop, but the words didn't come. Instead, a sensation of immense crushing weight settled onto my chest. It wasn't a sharp pain like they describe in the movies. It felt as if the ceiling of the coffee shop had collapsed directly onto my sternum. The air left my lungs and refused to return. My left arm went numb, dead and heavy at my side. My vision began to gray at the edges, tunneling down until all I could see was the foreclosure notice. Martha? Barbara's voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Martha, are you okay? I tried to stand up. My legs gave way. The coffee shop tilted sideways. The floor rushed up to meet me. I hit the wood hard, my cheek pressing against the cold planks. I heard a scream, heard a chair scrape, and heard Detective Morales shouting, "Call 911!" But I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My heart, the heart that had loved Francis, the heart that had raised Peter, the heart that had beaten steadily through 63 years of joy and grief, finally raised the white flag. It was broken, literally broken. The last thing I saw before the gray turned to black was the fake Martha in the photo, staring up at me from the table, smiling a smile that wasn't mine. I woke up to the sound of rhythmic beeping, beep, beep, beep. The air smelled of antiseptic and floor wax. The light was harsh, fluorescent, and hurting my eyes. I was in a hospital bed. There were tubes in my arm and a cannula in my nose. I tried to sit up, but my body felt like it was made of lead. Easy, Mrs. Bennett, easy. A nurse appeared at my side. Young, kind face. You're at Virtual Our Lady of Lourdes. You had a cardiac event. Not a heart attack, but close. Stress-induced cardiomyopathy. Broken heart syndrome. Broken heart syndrome. It sounded like a joke, a bad country song. But the pain in my chest was real. How long? I rasped. My throat was dry as sandpaper. 2 days, she said. You've been in and out. You need to rest. Your heart muscle was stunned. You need to keep your stress levels down or, she trailed off, or it could happen again. The door to the room opened. She's awake? A voice asked. My monitor sped up. Beep, beep, beep. It was Peter. He walked into the room carrying a bouquet of expensive lilies, the kind used for funerals. He was wearing a fresh suit and looked rested, healthy, concerned. Sir, visiting hours are over, the nurse said, and she needs to rest. I'm her son, Peter said, his voice smooth and authoritative. He pulled a folded document from his pocket. And I have medical power of attorney. Check your files. It was uploaded this morning. My eyes widened. I had never signed a power of attorney. The fake Martha, the actress. She must have signed it while I was unconscious. The nurse checked the computer. She frowned, then nodded. 5 minutes. But don't upset her. She left the room. Peter closed the door and turned the lock. The mask dropped instantly. The concern vanished, replaced by a cold, bored expression. He walked to the bed and tossed the flowers onto the side table without looking at them. You really made a scene, he said. He reached out and began to straighten the sheets on my bed. His hands smoothed the fabric over my legs. Brush, brush. It was obsessive, possessive. He was touching me like I was an object he owned. Get out, I whispered. I tried to pull away, but I was too weak. I'm not going anywhere, Mother, he said softly. You nearly died. You collapsed in a coffee shop, raving about bank robberies and fake people. Barbara called me. She's very concerned. Barbara knows, I said. The detective knows. Barbara knows you're confused, Peter said. He leaned in close. I could smell the peppermint of his breath masking the rot underneath. She saw you faint, saw you panic, and when I showed her the medical records Dr. Harrison prepared, the ones detailing your dementia diagnosis from 6 months ago, she started to understand. He placed his hand over mine, pinning me to the mattress. His grip was gentle, but immovable. You can't prove a thing, he whispered, his eyes locking onto mine with a dead, shark-like intensity. Every signature is yours. Every video shows you confused. You broke into my apartment? Hallucination. You saw me on the fire escape? Paranoia. He smiled. You are a sick old woman with a failing heart, and I am the devoted son who is going to put you somewhere safe. A nice facility in the Pine Barrens, gated, secure, where you can't hurt yourself ever again. He patted my hand. Rest up, Mom. The hearing is in 10 days, and you're going to lose. He straightened his tie, checked his reflection in the monitor, and walked out. I lay there in the silence, listening to the beep of the machine that was keeping me alive. He thought he had won. He thought I was broken. But he had made a mistake. He thought he was burying me. He didn't realize I was a seed. I looked at the window. The gray New Jersey sky was darkening. I wasn't going to the Pine Barrens, and I wasn't going to die in this bed. I closed my eyes and focused on the rhythm of my heart. Beat, beat, beat. It was damaged. It was stunned. But it was still beating. And as long as it was beating, I was dangerous. The hospital released me 3 days later with a bottle of beta blockers and a stern warning that another event would likely be my last. I walked out of the sliding glass doors into the humid Camden afternoon, carrying nothing but the plastic bag of clothes Barbara had brought me. I had nowhere to go. My house was in foreclosure, the locks likely changed by the bank or by Peter. My bank accounts were frozen pending the fraud investigation, leaving me with the $300 cash Barbara had pressed into my hand before she left. I stood on the curb, watching the traffic on Haddon Avenue, and feeling the vibrations of the heavy trucks in the soles of my shoes. I was Martha Bennett. I had employed 40 people, built a legacy, and now I was homeless, standing on a street corner and waiting for a cab because my son had stolen my car keys while I was unconscious. I took a cab to the Garden State Motor Lodge, a rusted-out motel on the Strip just outside Pennsauken. It was the kind of place that charged by the week and didn't ask for ID. The sign out front promised color TV and AC, but the no on the vacancy sign flickered with a dying electrical buzz. I paid for a week in cash. Room 112. The room smelled of stale cigarette smoke and industrial cleaner, a chemical attempt to mask decades of desperation. The carpet was sticky, and the wallpaper was peeling at the seams, revealing the yellowed drywall underneath. I sat on the edge of the stiff mattress and stared at the water stain on the ceiling. It looked like a map of a country that didn't exist. Sleep was impossible. The motel was alive with the sounds of transient misery, slamming doors, muffled arguments through paper-thin walls, and the relentless low-frequency hum of 18-wheelers grinding down the turnpike just 100 yards away. I lay in the dark, watching the neon sign outside flicker through the thin curtains, casting a rhythmic red glow across the room. Buzz. Dark. Buzz. Dark. It felt like a countdown. Every time the red light hit Francis's photo, which I had rescued from my purse, his face seemed to change. In the daylight, he looked like the husband I loved. In the red neon, he looked like the victim I hadn't been able to save. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I jumped, my heart giving a painful lurch against my ribs. I stared at the screen. It was 2 a.m. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Bennett. My name is Mabel. I used to work at the bakery. I was the shift manager at the Haddonfield location. I hesitated. Peter controlled the phones. Peter monitored everything. Was this a trap? A second text appeared, 3 bubbles dancing on the screen. I copied your number from the emergency contact binder 5 minutes before Peter fired me last week. He caught me taking photos of the ledger. I sat up, gripping the phone. Mabel. I remembered her. Quiet girl, sharp eyes, always organized the display case by color gradient. I heard what happened to you, the text continued. I have information about Peter and Andrew, things they did that I documented. I'm scared to come forward, but I think you deserve to know the truth. Can we meet? I stared at the glowing screen until my eyes burned. If this was a trap, Peter was getting sloppy. But if it wasn't, if this was real, it was the lifeline I'd been praying for. I typed back, when and where. The response came immediately, as if she had been holding her breath, waiting for me. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Flying J truck stop off the turnpike in Bordentown, back booth. Come alone. At dawn, I got up and swallowed my heart medication with a cup of lukewarm tap water. I put on my coat, pulling the collar up to hide my face. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back was gray, gaunt, and terrified, but her eyes were hard. I called a rideshare to the Flying J. It was 20 minutes north. The truck stop was a sprawling complex of diesel pumps and asphalt, an island of noise in the middle of the highway system. It smelled of gasoline and frying grease. I walked inside. The diner section was crowded with eating breakfast, heads bent over plates of eggs and hash browns. The air was thick with the sound of clattering silverware and low conversations. I scanned the room. There she was. Mabel was huddled in the back booth, furthest from the door. She was wearing a heavy parka, her hands wrapped white-knuckled around a mug of cold coffee. She looked like a frightened bird ready to take flight at the first sudden movement. As I approached, her eyes widened. She stiffened, her gaze darting to the counter. "Don't look," she hissed, her voice barely audible over the noise of the diner. "Keep walking. Sit down. Smile." I slid into the booth, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Mabel?" "The man at the counter," she whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. Black leather jacket, crew cut. "He hasn't ordered food. He's just watching. He's been tracking me for 3 days, Mrs. Bennett. Peter knows." I felt a chill run down my spine. I resisted the urge to turn around. "Why are you doing this, Mabel? It's dangerous." Mabel's fear momentarily gave way to anger. Her jaw tightened. "My son has asthma," she whispered. "When Peter fired me last week, he cut off my health insurance effective immediately. He told me severance was for loyal employees." And then he laughed. "He looked at me like I was trash, Mrs. Bennett. I'm not doing this just for you. I'm doing it because I want to watch him lose everything." She reached into her oversized bag. She didn't pull it out fully. She just slid a thick manila envelope across the table, shielding it with her body. "Take this," she said. "It's everything. The real ledgers, the emails he thought he deleted, the payments to the actress." I put my hand on the envelope. It was heavy, heavier than paper should be. "And this," she whispered. She slid a small silver thumb drive across the table. It clinked against my coffee cup. "What is this?" "I found it in the safe at the Haddonfield office," Mabel said. Her voice broke. "The file name is Insurance 2010. Mrs. Bennett, I watched the first 10 seconds and I couldn't watch the rest. I think it's from the hospital, from the night Francis died." The room seemed to drop away. The noise of the diner faded into a buzzing static. Insurance 2010. "Why would he keep it?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Leverage," Mabel said. "He keeps everything, in case he needs to trade it." She looked at the man at the counter again. He was standing up. "Go," Mabel said. "Leave through the kitchen exit. My car is out back. I'll create a distraction. Just go. Please." I grabbed the envelope and the drive. I shoved them into my purse. I stood up, trying to look casual, and walked toward the restrooms in the back. As soon as I was out of sight of the main room, I pushed through the swinging doors into the kitchen. "Hey, you can't be back here," a cook shouted. I ignored him, shoved past a dishwasher, and burst out the back door into the cold, gray morning. The rideshare I had scheduled was waiting. I threw myself into the back seat. "Go," I told the driver. "Just drive south. Get on the turnpike." We merged onto I-95. The traffic was heavy, a river of steel flowing through the industrial heart of New Jersey. I kept checking the rearview mirror. "Is someone following us?" the driver asked, eyeing me in the mirror. "I hope not," I said. 3 miles down the road, near exit 7, I saw it. A black Chevy Tahoe, tinted windows, no front license plate. It was weaving through traffic, cutting off a semi-truck, closing the distance. It wasn't driving aggressively. It was driving with purpose. It matched our speed exactly, 65, 70, 75. "That SUV," I said. "He's following us." The driver looked. You sure? The Tahoe pulled into the left lane. It accelerated, pulling alongside us. I looked out the window. The tint was dark, almost opaque. I couldn't see the driver. I expected a gun, expected them to ram us. I braced myself for the impact, clutching my purse to my chest as if the paper inside could protect me from 2 tons of steel. But the SUV didn't ram us. Instead, the rear passenger window glided down. Just 2 inches. A hand appeared in the gap. A man's hand. Leather glove. It didn't wave. It didn't point a weapon. It simply made a shushing motion, a single index finger pressed to invisible lips. Be quiet. Then the window rolled up. The black beast accelerated, the engine roaring, and vanished into the sea of chrome and steel on the turnpike, leaving me gasping for air in the back of a Toyota Camry. They weren't trying to kill me. Not yet. They were telling me they could touch me whenever they wanted. I had the driver drop me off at a library in Cherry Hill. I couldn't go back to the motel. It felt like a coffin now. They knew where I was. I sat in a study carrel in the back of the library, surrounded by students and homeless people seeking warmth. I opened the envelope. Inside were copies of financial records from Peter's office. Bank statements showing transfers to accounts in Zurich, invoices that didn't match actual purchases, and a ledger. It was in Peter's handwriting. It documented cash payments to someone with the initials MR, and notes beside the payments said medical errand and signature practice. Miriam Reeves, the woman in the bank photo, the actress. Peter had paid her $15,000 to become me. But there was another name in the ledger. DL payments going back 3 years. Monthly retainers. Large lump sums marked consultation and insurance. The first payment was dated October 2009, 1 month before Francis died. Over $200,000 total paid to DL. I felt sick. DL? Who was DL? And then at the bottom of the stack, a printout of an email chain between Peter and Andrew. Andrew, I'm uncomfortable with how far this is going. She's our mother. The house foreclosure is too much. Peter, then don't think of her as our mother. Think of her as a liability we are liquidating. If we don't close the Meridian deal by November, we lose everything. Do you want to be poor, Andrew? Because I remember being poor. I'm not going back. My sons, my boys, discussing my liquidation like I was a failing subsidiary. I touched the thumb drive in my pocket. Insurance 2010. I needed to watch it, but I couldn't do it here. I couldn't watch my husband die in a public library. My phone rang. I stared at it. Unknown number. I answered. Hello? Mrs. Bennett? A woman's voice. Shaking. Panicked. My name is Miriam Reeves. I'm the actress. Peter paid me. I know who you are, I said, my voice cold. You stole my life. I didn't know, she sobbed. He told me it was a documentary. He said you had dementia and he needed to recreate scenes for a court case to get you help. But I just got a call. A man. He said if I talked to anyone, he'd make sure I never worked again. He knew where my daughter goes to school. Mrs. Bennett, I'm scared. I think Peter knows I'm planning to come forward. Meet me, I said. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. I have a lawyer, Cecilia Boone in Trenton. Can you get there? Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll be there. I hung up. I could no longer stay in Cherry Hill. It was Peter's territory. But I didn't want to run away. And so I drove to the train station, still contemplating what to do next when my phone pinged. It was a transaction alert from the bakery's business account, which I was still technically a signatory to. Tropicana Resort, Atlantic City, $5,000. Peter was already celebrating, and I knew exactly where he liked to sit, the high-limit poker room, the one with the glass walls where everyone could see him win. I bought a ticket to Atlantic City. I wasn't running away. I was following the money. The train ride was a blur. I didn't look at the scenery. I looked at the transaction on my phone, burning the amount into my retinas. An hour later, I was walking the boardwalk. The wind off the ocean was freezing, whipping my coat around my legs, but the lights of the casinos were bright enough to blind God. It was the city of desperate people, and I fit right in. I walked into the Tropicana, and the noise hit me like a physical wave. The ringing of slot machines, the shouts of drunks, and the music pumping from the ceiling. It was chaos. It was safety. I wandered the floor, gripping my purse. I wasn't gambling. I kept my head down, scanning the high-limit tables. I knew exactly where to look. I wasn't a tourist. I was a mother looking for the son who stole her retirement. I found myself near the high-limit poker room. It was separated from the main floor by a wall of glass, a fishbowl for the whales. I looked through the glass and stopped dead. Sitting at the center table, wearing a crisp white shirt and loosened tie, was Peter. He was laughing. He had a drink in one hand and a stack of black chips in the other. He tossed them into the pot with a flick of his wrist. Those chips were my house. They were Francis's life insurance. They were the money I had saved for my grandchildren. He was gambling with my blood. I stood there, frozen, watching the monster in his natural habitat. He looked so happy, so unburdened. He had destroyed his mother, stolen her fortune, and now he was relaxing with a game of cards. Then he looked up. His eyes scanned the crowd outside the glass. They locked onto mine. For 3 seconds, the world stopped. The slot machines went silent. The music faded. It was just me and my son, staring at each other through the bulletproof glass. His smile didn't falter. He didn't look shocked. He raised his glass to me, a toast. To the victor go the spoils. Then he picked up his phone from the felt table and dialed a number, his eyes never leaving mine. Panic, hot and primal, surged through me. He was calling the man in the SUV. He was calling DL. I turned and ran. I pushed through the crowds of tourists, knocking over a cocktail waitress's tray and ignoring the shouts. I ran for the exit, for the cold air of the boardwalk, and for the darkness. "Mom, wait!" I heard his voice behind me. He was coming. I burst out the doors and scrambled into a waiting taxi. "Drive!" I screamed at the driver. "Just drive!" As the taxi pulled away, I looked back. Peter was standing under the casino awning, phone to his ear, watching me go. He wasn't chasing me. He didn't need to chase me. He knew I was running out of road. But he didn't know about the thumb drive in my pocket. He didn't know that tomorrow I wasn't just going to a lawyer. I was going to war. Cecilia Boone's office was on the 4th floor of a brick building on West State Street in Trenton, overlooking the gray dome of the State House. It wasn't a fancy office. The carpet was worn, and the air conditioner rattled in the window, but the shelves were lined with thick legal binders that suggested she won more often than she lost. I arrived at 8:45 a.m., breathless and shaking. I had the envelope clutched to my chest. Miriam Reeves, the actress, was already there, sitting in the waiting room wearing sunglasses and a scarf, looking like she wanted to disappear into the upholstery. Cecilia didn't waste time with pleasantries. She ushered us into her office and locked the door. She was younger than I expected, maybe 45, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a stillness that calmed the panic in the room. "Show me," she said. I laid it all out. The notebook I had stolen from Peter's car, the photos of the buyout contract, the ledger Mabel had given me, and the bank photos of Miriam. Cecilia put on her glasses and started reading. The room was silent except for the scratching of her pen and the distant sound of traffic on State Street. After 20 minutes, she looked up. Her face was grim. "The gaslighting alone is criminal elder abuse," she said. "The identity theft, 5 to 10 years. The embezzlement, another 15 if we prove intent. Peter has been busy." She turned to Miriam. "And you? You impersonated a woman to facilitate bank fraud. You're looking at conspiracy charges unless you give us everything." Miriam burst into tears. "I told you. He said it was a documentary. He coached me. He showed me videos of her walking, talking, and signing her name. He was obsessive and made me practice the signature for hours until I got the tremor right." Cecilia turned back to the ledger. She tapped the entry marked DL. "Martha," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "These dates. October 2009. That's a month before your husband died. I know, I whispered. You don't pay a private investigator $200,000 for consultation, Cecilia said, and you certainly don't pay him an insurance retainer for 15 years unless he knows where the bodies are buried. The air left the room. You think? I couldn't say it. I think Peter didn't just wait for his father to die, Cecilia said. I think he expedited the process. Before the horror could fully land, the intercom on her desk buzzed. It was a harsh, jagged sound that made us all jump. Cecilia, her assistant's voice crackled, tight with panic. I can't stop them. You have 2 officers from the Cherry Hill PD here. They have a mental health warrant for Martha Bennett. They say she's a danger to herself. They're coming back. Cecilia's expression didn't change, but her eyes hardened. She looked at me. Did Peter file that emergency guardianship petition? I nodded, tears spilling over. He said November 15th. That's today. Then this is it. Cecilia said, they're here to take you for a 72-hour psychiatric hold. If they take you now, Peter gets temporary custody of your assets. He'll sell the bakery before you get out. She stood up. We have 2 minutes. You have to make a choice, Martha. You can surrender, let them take you, and we fight this from inside the system. Or, she looked at the silver thumb drive sitting on the desk, the one marked Insurance 2010. Or we look at that drive right now. And if it shows what I think it shows, the police aren't taking you anywhere. I looked at the door. I could hear heavy footsteps in the hallway. I looked at the drive. I thought about Francis, about the night he died, and about Peter cleaning the coffee mug. I'm not going anywhere, I said. Play it. Cecilia plugged the drive into her computer. She clicked the file. The screen flickered, then resolved into the grainy, black and white silence of a hospital room. The timestamp in the corner read Nov 14, 2010 to 11:54 p.m. There was Francis, my Francis, sleeping in the hospital bed hooked up to monitors. His chest rose and fell in a rhythm I had memorized over 30 years of marriage. He looked so peaceful, so alive. Then, the door handle turned. A figure stepped out of the shadows. Even in the low resolution, I knew the slope of those shoulders. I knew the walk. It was Peter. He was 24 years old, wearing his favorite college hoodie. He didn't look nervous, didn't hesitate. He just walked to the bedside of the father who had taught him to ride a bike and how to bake bread. He looked down at Francis. He didn't touch his hand. He didn't say goodbye. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a syringe. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. On the screen, Peter leaned over the IV line. It was so casual, so mundane. He inserted the needle into the port and pushed the plunger. He administered the death of my husband with the same efficiency he used to tally the register. He withdrew the syringe, put it back in his pocket, and stood there for 30 seconds, watching the liquid enter his father's veins. He stood over the bed, looking down at his dying father. He thought he was alone. He thought the PI had disabled the security feed just like he'd paid for. And then he smiled. It was a private, terrifying smirk directed at Francis, a look of pure triumph. He had no idea that Lassiter had planted a pinhole camera in the smoke detector for his own personal agenda. 90 seconds later, Francis's body jerked on the bed. On the monitor behind him, the green heart rate line spiked erratically, ventricular fibrillation, before flatlining into a solid tone. The room exploded with the red flashing lights of the crash alarm. Nurses rushed in and started CPR. Francis flatlined at exactly 12:03 a.m. I was staring at proof that my son had murdered his father. The office door banged open. 2 uniformed officers stepped in. Martha Bennett? One barked. Cecilia stood up, blocking their path. She turned the monitor toward them. Officers, she said, her voice shaking with rage. You're going to want to see this. We're not dealing with a mental health case anymore. We're dealing with a homicide. The next 4 hours were a blur of suits and badges. We were moved to the Mercer County Prosecutor's Office. I sat in an interview room with Detective Martinez, a man with tired eyes and nicotine-stained fingers. He watched the video 3 times. He didn't say a word. Then he looked at the ledger. DL, David Lassiter, Martinez said, spitting the name out like a curse. I know him. He is a bottom-feeder PI out of Morristown. He runs a security firm next to a bail bondsman. Why did he have the video? I asked. Why keep it for 15 years? Leverage, Martinez said. We picked him up an hour ago. He folded instantly and claims Peter hired him in 2009 to research medications that mimic heart failure. Peter paid him to install the camera in the hospital room because Peter wanted proof of death for the insurance payout. Martinez leaned forward. But Lassiter kept a copy. He wasn't just holding it for insurance, Mrs. Bennett. We found a draft email in his outbox dated for next month. He was preparing to blackmail your son for $1 million. He was going to bleed him dry. And the payments? I pointed to the MR entries. Miriam Reeves gave a full statement, Martinez said. She confirmed everything, the acting coaching, the bank fraud. He paused. He looked at me with genuine pity. But she told us something else. She said she saw Peter meet with Lassiter last month. Peter bought a vial of liquid from him. He called it his insurance policy. He told Lassiter, "It worked on the father. It'll work on the mother. I just need the dosage right this time so it looks like dementia and not a heart attack." The room spun. The palpitations, the brain fog, the fatigue that had sent me to the ER, the stress-induced heart event. It wasn't stress. It wasn't age. My son had been microdosing me with the same poison he used to kill his father. He was dialing it back just enough to rot my mind without stopping my heart completely. He was systematically killing me by inches to make the incompetency plea stick. "We have enough," Martinez said, standing up. "We're filing murder charges for Francis Bennett. Attempted murder for you, in addition to fraud and elder abuse." "Where is he?" I asked. "We tracked his movements," Martinez said. "He drove back from Atlantic City at 4 a.m. this morning. He's currently at the main bakery location in Haddonfield, acting like it's just another business day. We're moving in now." I wasn't there for the arrest, but Detective Martinez showed me the body cam footage later. I needed to see it. I needed to see the end. The footage showed the officers walking into the Haddonfield bakery. The air was thick with flour dust. Peter was sitting in the back office, my old office. He had his feet up on the desk and was on the phone. When the officers walked in, he didn't look scared. He looked annoyed. "Can I help you?" he asked, covering the receiver. "This is a private business." "Peter Bennett," the officer said. "Stand up and put your hands behind your back." Peter laughed. He actually laughed. "Do you know who I am?" he said. "I have the mayor on speed dial. Get out of my office before I have your badges." "You're under arrest for the murder of Francis Bennett," the officer said. Peter froze. The phone slipped from his hand and hit the desk with a clatter. That was a heart attack," he stammered. 15 years ago. You can't." Detective Martinez stepped into the frame. He was holding a tablet. "We have the video, Peter," Martinez said. "We have the syringe, we have Lassiter, and we have your mother." He turned the tablet screen so Peter could see. He played the hospital footage. Peter watched himself kill his father. And then the mask slipped. It didn't crumble into sadness. It twisted into a rictus of pure animalistic hate. He realized he was trapped and that the stupid old woman had outsmarted him. He roared, a sound like a wounded animal, and lunged across the desk. He tried to grab the tablet to smash the evidence. "I'll kill her!" He screamed as 3 officers tackled him to the ground. "She's senile. She's nothing. I built this. It's mine." They dragged him out in handcuffs, with flour dust coating his expensive suit and screaming curses at the mother who had given him life. We weren't done. The next day, the police executed a search warrant on Andrew's house. They found emails and transfers. Andrew came in voluntarily. He looked 10 years older than he had a week ago. He took a plea deal. In exchange for testifying against Peter, he would get probation. I sat behind the two-way glass and watched my younger son confess. I didn't know about Dad, Andrew sobbed. I swear, Peter told me Dad died naturally. But I knew about the poison for Mom. Peter told me he was giving her something to help her sleep. I knew it was making her sick. I was too scared to stop him. Scared of what? The interrogator asked. Andrew looked up, his eyes haunted. Peter told me that accidents happen to everyone, Andrew whispered. He said, even brothers have accidents, Andrew. He wasn't just going to kill Mom. He was going to kill anyone who knew the truth. I closed my eyes and leaned my forehead against the cold glass. I had lost them both. One was a monster, the other was a coward, and I was the one left to sweep up the wreckage. Cecilia Boone got me everything back. The house, the bakery locations, the money Peter had stolen was recovered from the offshore accounts. The court froze all of Peter's assets pending the trial, but the real battle was just beginning. The trial didn't begin with a gavel. It began with a circus. The steps of the Mercer County Courthouse in Trenton were choked with news vans, their satellite dishes aimed like weapons at the front doors. The New Jersey press had latched onto the story with a rabid hunger. They had named it the Bakery Murder, and they called Peter the Poison Son. I had to walk through a gauntlet of microphones and flashing cameras just to get inside. Mrs. Bennett, is it true he poisoned you too? Mrs. Bennett, do you believe your son killed your husband? I didn't answer. I kept my head high, gripping Cecilia Boone's arm, and walked into the building. Inside, courtroom 4B was a pressure cooker. The air was stale, recycled, and thick with the scent of damp wool coats and nervous sweat. The radiators clanked in the corners, fighting the January chill seeping through the old brick walls. I sat in the front row, directly behind the prosecutor's table. My back was stiff against the unforgiving wood of the bench. I was surrounded by the ghosts of the life I used to have. Francis was gone, my sons were on trial, and my home felt like a crime scene. When Peter walked in, the room went silent. He didn't look like a prisoner facing life without parole. He looked like he was arriving for a board meeting he intended to lead. He wore a navy suit tailored to perfection, his hair slicked back, and he was carrying a yellow legal pad and a Mont Blanc pen. He didn't look at the jury with fear. He sat at the defense table, leaned back, and checked his watch. He scanned the room, his eyes sliding over me without a flicker of recognition, as if I were part of the furniture. He was broadcasting a message. This is beneath me. I will win this. Andrew sat separately on the witness bench, huddled with his court-appointed lawyer. He looked terrible. He had lost 20 pounds. His skin was gray, and he wouldn't lift his head. He looked 10 years older than he had 6 months ago. The prosecutor, Natasha Suttons, was sharp and relentless. She didn't waste time with theatrics. She laid out the charges methodically: first-degree murder, attempted murder, elder abuse, identity theft, medical fraud, and embezzlement. She called her witnesses. Miriam Reeves testified first. She was shaking, her voice barely audible. She told the jury how Peter had recruited her. He treated his mother like a science project, she had said, weeping softly. He showed me hours of video, analyzed her limp, and critiqued my performance. He often said, "Make her look pathetic. Make her look gone." Then came David Lassiter, the private investigator. He was slimy and defiant, testifying only to save his own skin. He detailed the surveillance on Francis, detailed the research into heart-stopping drugs, and confirmed the email about blackmail. Peter Bennett didn't want to wait for nature, Lassiter drawled. He wanted to be the executor. The jury looked sick. Then Suttons played the video. The courtroom lights dimmed. The screens flickered to life. The hospital room. 2010. For the second time, I watched my son murder my husband. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the hum of the ventilation system. I watched the jury's faces, and I saw a young woman in the back row cover her mouth. I also saw the foreman, a stern older man, cross his arms and glare at Peter. Peter didn't look at the screen. He was writing notes on his legal pad. Scratch, scratch, scratch. He was probably critiquing the video quality. Then it was Andrew's turn. Andrew walked to the stand like a man walking to the gallows. He was sworn in. He sat down, hunched over, and refused to look at the defense table. Mr. Bennett, Natasha Sutton said, "Tell us what your brother told you about your mother." Andrew's voice cracked. He told me she was a liability and that we needed to liquidate her assets before she ruined the sale. Did you know about the poison? I knew he was giving her something, Andrew whispered. He said it was to help her sleep. I knew it was making her sick. But I didn't stop him. Why? Suttons asked. Why didn't you stop him? Objection, Peter's lawyer shouted. Speculation. Overruled, the judge said. Answer the question. Andrew turned slowly and looked at Peter and Peter. Peter didn't look angry. He smiled. It was a small, chilling twist of the lips, a private signal between brothers. He tapped his pen against the table. Tap, tap. It was a warning. Remember who I am. Remember what I do. Andrew flinched physically as if he'd been struck. He looked terrified. But then he looked at me. He saw his mother sitting alone in the front row, the woman who had protected him from bullies and the woman who had baked him birthday cakes. He took a deep breath. I didn't stop him because I was scared, Andrew sobbed, the sound raw and ugly. I tried to back out last month. I told him it was going too far, and Peter looked at me, his own brother, and said, accidents happen to everyone, Andrew, even you. The courtroom erupted. He told me Dad was just a business decision. Andrew shouted over the objections. He said he wasn't just going to kill Mom. He was going to kill anyone who stood in the way of the money. The judge banged her gavel, demanding order, but the damage was already done. The jury had heard it. Peter wasn't just a killer. He was a fratricidal threat. Peter stopped smiling. For the first time, he stopped writing and stared at Andrew with eyes that promised death. When it was my turn to testify, the room settled into a heavy, expectant silence. I walked to the stand, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. I had brought the notebook. The judge had allowed it into evidence as Exhibit G. Mrs. Bennett? Suttons asked. Can you tell the court what this is? I lifted the black notebook. It was heavy in my hand, heavier than paper should be. This isn't just evidence, I told the jury, my voice steady and cold as the Delaware River in winter. This is a receipt. I opened it to the page where he had tracked my confusion. My son itemized my sanity, I said. He put a price tag on my confusion and tracked my decline like he tracked inventory. He looked at the woman who gave him life and saw nothing but a debit column on a spreadsheet that needed to be erased. I looked directly at Peter. He was looking at me now. His face was tight and his jaw was clenched. You thought I was weak because I was old, I said to him, ignoring the defense attorney's frantic objection. You thought because I baked bread and loved my husband, I was soft. You forgot that I built a business from nothing. You forgot that I have survived winters you couldn't even imagine. I leaned into the microphone. And I survived you. The defense tried to cross-examine me. They tried to claim I was confused, that I had misinterpreted the notebook. But I was razor sharp. I corrected their dates, cited the specific entries, and dismantled their narrative with the same precision I used to measure yeast. By the time I stepped down, Peter's lawyers looked exhausted. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, the courtroom was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. The foreman stood up. He didn't look at Peter. We find the defendant, Peter Bennett, regarding count 1, first-degree murder, guilty. The word hung in the air. Count 2, attempted murder, guilty. Count 3, elder abuse, guilty. 37 counts, 37 guilties that rang out like church bells. I watched Peter. The first guilty hit him like a physical blow. He blinked, confused, as if the word was in a foreign language. The second guilty made him flinch. By the 10th guilty, the mask of the arrogant CEO dissolved. His face went slack, then red, then purple. He wasn't looking at the jury anymore. He was staring at the empty space in front of him, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. He realized it. Finally, he wasn't going to a country club prison, and he wasn't going to talk his way out of this. He started to shake, not with sorrow, but with the vibrating, incandescent rage of a narcissist who has been told no for the first time in his life. He turned to his expensive lawyers. "Fix this," he hissed, loud enough for the mic to catch. "I pay you to fix this." "Sit down, Mr. Bennett," the judge warned. Peter stood up. "No, this is a mistake. She's lying. Look at her. She's senile." "Marshals," the judge barked. 2 federal marshals moved in. Peter lunged toward the railing at me. "You ruined it," he screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. "It was mine. It was all mine." The marshals tackled him and slammed him onto the defense table. The Mont Blanc pen flew across the room. I didn't flinch. I sat there, stone-faced, watching the monster reveal himself to the world. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Judge Ramona Price, a black woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and zero tolerance for cruelty, lowered her glasses and looked at Peter with the kind of disdain usually reserved for rot. "Mr. Bennett," she said, her voice echoing off the high ceilings, "you treated your family like assets to be liquidated. You thought you could edit reality to suit your greed. But in this courtroom, we deal in truth." She paused, letting the weight of the sentence hang in the air. "You wanted to erase your mother. You wanted to put her in a box where no one could hear her. The irony is, that is exactly what I am going to do to you." She leaned forward. "You are sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of Francis Bennett, plus 30 years for attempted murder and fraud. You will die in a concrete box, Mr. Bennett, and unlike your mother, no one will come looking for you. You are insolvent." She slammed the gavel. As they led him away in handcuffs with chains rattling around his waist, he finally looked at me, really looked at me. For a second, the rage was gone. He looked scared, like the little boy who used to help me knead dough at dawn who had cried when he burned his finger. He mouthed one word, "Mom?" I looked at him. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, grieving the boy he used to be. But the boy was gone. Only the monster remained. I turned my back on him and walked out of the courtroom. 6 months later, I stood in the original Cherry Hill Bakery at 4:35 in the morning. It was quiet. The world outside was still asleep. The streetlights on Route 70 cast long orange shadows across the parking lot. I had my hands in flour. I was kneading dough. Push, turn, fold. Push, turn, fold. It was a rhythm my body remembered better than my own name. I had sold the corrupted locations and had used the money to pay off the debts and to restore the stolen funds to the employees Peter had cheated. I had kept this one, the original bakery. I had stripped away the corporate renovations. I brought back the wooden tables as well as the smell of real butter and yeast. I was 64 years old. My eldest son was in a maximum security prison in Trenton. My youngest son was on probation in Ohio, trying to start over where no one knew his name. I hadn't spoken to him since the trial. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. Survival isn't a victory parade. It's a quiet room. It's the ability to sleep without a camera watching you, and the freedom to make a cup of coffee without wondering if it's poisoned. I walked over to the window and looked at the reflection in the glass. I saw gray hair and lines around my eyes, but I saw shoulders that weren't slumped and eyes that were clear. I flipped the sign to open. The neon buzzed to life, casting a warm and defiant glow onto the dark New Jersey street. They tried to bury me. They tried to rewrite my history, but they forgot that I am made of stronger stuff than ink and paper. I am made of flour and fire. The bell above the door chimed. I turned. A man walked in. Big, older, wearing a trucker hat and a flannel shirt. It was Austin, our first customer from 30 years ago. He stopped when he saw me, looked at the fresh bread on the racks, and looked at Francis's framed dollar bill on the wall. His eyes filled with tears. "Martha," he said, his voice rough, "you're still here." I wiped my hands on my apron. I smiled. "I'm still here, Austin," I said, and for the first time in a long time, I meant it. I walked to the counter. "Good morning," I said, and it was. "You've made it to the end. You walked through the fire with Martha. But I have to be honest, it breaks my heart when I see people listen to these stories, feel these heavy emotions, and then just walk away. No subscription, no support, just silence. It feels like I'm pouring my soul into a void, working days and nights to bring these voices to life, only to be met with ghost viewers. Please, don't be another ghost. If this story kept you company, don't just take it and leave. You owe it to the story to leave a mark, a subscribe, a super thanks, or even just commenting your city. Tell me where in the world you are listening from. Let me know exactly where my voice is traveling so I know I'm not alone in this. And if you aren't ready to leave yet, don't. There are 2 more real-life journeys right here on your screen. Pick one. Stay with me a little longer. Don't let the silence win. Until next time.